It's been a summer full of paying back President Trump's political foes, eliminating any dissenting data or viewpoints, and employing brute force to enact his agenda. Whether it's a stunning campaign targeting key officials of the Federal Reserve, his purge of the CDC, or unprecedented use of the National Guard over the furious objections of Democratic governors, Trump is dramatically expanding the bounds of the presidency like no one before him has in modern times. As Democrats say, their fears of an unchecked executive are ringing truer by the day. Yet there are signs that Trump's strategy is facing new limits, like the major ruling from an appeals court late Friday that found his sweeping tariffs unlawful, putting the president's signature policy and the world's economic order at the doorstep of the Supreme Court. While this morning, China asserting its strength on the world stage, meeting with U.S. adversaries like Russia and countries isolated by Trump's tariffs like India. So where does this all leave Trump's agenda? Well, I have an excellent panel to break that all down this morning. Molly Ball, author and Wall Street Journal reporter, Bloomberg's Mario Parker, and CNN's Stephen Collinson. Good morning to you all. Nice to see you on this Labor Day weekend. Thank you for being here. Look, Trump has long fired people. Of course, he came to fame with The Apprentice. You're fired. He has long fired people. He did so in the first term. You know, what's different this time are the people that he's targeting. Here's just a list of some of the people who have been fired or attempted to fire, Lisa Cook being one of them. Of course, the Federal Reserve sits on the Federal Reserve Board. She's fighting that effort to fire her. But all along down the line, the CDC director, Surface Transportation Board, head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner that puts out that monthly jobs report that Trump didn't like. It is an effort to go to target any sort of viewpoint, any sort of data that conflicts with his agenda, even if that data is true.
That's right. Or even if these officials are supposed to be independent or nonpartisan, or, as you say, mere referees of government data like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, even like the Federal Reserve, which is supposed to be independent, and which, of course, the independence of which is so important to the economy and to the markets. So I think you're right that firing people has always been part of Trump's brand. And you remember during the debate with Biden, when Biden was still in the race, that was a big part of his critique was, look, even when people are incompetent, you're not willing to get rid of them. You're not willing to root out the incompetence, the waste, the problems in the government. So I think there is a view that people like the idea that he's strong, that he's assertive, that he looks out for problems and takes care of them. On the other hand, it really, at a time when people don't trust the government anyway, at a time when people don't trust expertise or official sources of information, this further erodes that, because this is an administration that doesn't believe there's any such thing as independent or nonpartisan information. It believes that anything that conflicts with Trump's views is the deep state,
right,
and therefore needs to be eliminated. And so there's a lot of potential consequences.
I mean, and it has a chilling effect.
No, absolutely. And so you see some of that playing out, right, with the CDC ousting. You see with the Surface Transportation Board this week as well, Lisa Cook, which you mentioned also. The markets were muted. Let me note that, first of all, with the Fed, some of the moves with the Fed. He's lulled the markets in some ways into kind of a hypnosis, right, going back to Liberation Day, where you haven't seen this kind of parabolic reaction. However, that being said, I mean, the long-term consequences of, a central bank not being independent, for example, CDC, a health agency a department not being independent, for example, it does erode the trust and, I mean, the politicization of it all.
And look, and it's this blatant effort by this to use prosecutions, use investigations against his political foes. I mean, this is just another, just a list of just the people who have been targeted or threatened for some investigations. John Bolton, of course, his house was raided. There's Letitia James, the Senator Adam Schiff, a Democrat, Jack Smith, all people who are perceived enemies. You know, but there's no real signs that he's going after any Republicans who may be in line with him, who could be doing the same thing. I mean, the effort to target Lisa Cook, Adam Schiff, Letitia James are about allegedly listing multiple homes on their documents for mortgages and bank documents and the like. But there are reports of other people who are doing the same thing, like a Republican, like Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, who's running for Senate. No investigation there that we know of.
Right. The president said something very interesting in the cabinet meeting this week that went for 3 hours. In all that verbiage, he said, I'm the president of the United States and I can do exactly what I want. Now, that's true in the direct sense in which he's now weaponized the Justice Department to go after people who are perceived as his enemies. But in a constitutional sense, it's not true. The president can't do what he wants in a republic. And this is where we're going to get into a difficult situation. You had a CIA officer that was fired for briefing Trump, presumably something he didn't want to hear before he met Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. You had this situation at the CDC when the director didn't want to trash generations of science just because it suited the president's agenda. And the White House came out and said, well, if you don't share the president's agenda on health, we'll show you the door. That gets you into a difficult and potentially dangerous position when one person is deciding what reality is and everybody else has to shape their analysis to that reality. Sooner or later, whether it's in foreign affairs, health, vaccinations, for example, that's going to exact a price.
And the question is going to be, can he get reined in any such way? Can courts rein him in as well? There are some indications that some of the efforts that he has moved ahead with are going to at least get pulled back for now. One of which, of course, is that big ruling that happened on Friday, the appeals court striking down many of Trump's tariffs, saying he overstepped his authority. There's several other things, immigration related, that he's been held back on. Of course, that tariff policy can still stay until the Supreme Court ultimately decides what to do here. But that is so significant, that ruling on tariffs, because there's all this money going to the Treasury right now.
Well,
$107 billion or so. Like, what happens if the Supreme Court says that Trump has been acting unlawfully on tariffs, which is his signature policy?
Exactly. And this is the second trade court that has found that most of these tariffs, not all of them, some of them are under a national security authority, but a lot of these sweeping tariffs do fall under the authority that now two courts have said. And this ball is now in the Supreme Court's court, so to speak. And I think that is, to Stephen's point, that's where this is all headed, is a test of the checks and balances in the Constitution, is when a president is this aggressive about testing the norms, rules, and laws that are intended to rein in the executive, are the other branches capable of exercising their authority to rein him in? We have seen that this is a Congress that is very, 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 very reluctant to push back against the Trump administration.
They could assert its authority on tariffs, and they've decided not to. Congress
Rand Paul actually put it on the floor, tried to get them to do it, and there were only 3 Republicans went along with him on something that has been a tenet of the sort of backbone of conservative thinking for generations. So, has enough happened that the Congress is now starting to get cold feet and be willing to push back? We shall see when they come back. And then there's the courts. We've seen this conservative court also be quite reluctant to push back on an aggressive executive, and in fact has expanded the executive's powers in all kinds of ways in their recent rulings on Trump initiatives. So where does that go when you have either something like the Fed firing, which I think is also headed for the Supreme Court, which previously sort of carved out the Fed from its ruling that Trump could dismiss heads, members of independent agencies, and then on this tariff ruling, where does the court go? So these are both very, very significant.
Yeah, I mean, what happens if they lose on tariffs in the Supreme Court?
Well, one of the people we talked to said that trading partners have to be dazed and confused right now, right? And note that Scott Bessent filed comments on Friday as well, saying that this potentially undermines the U.S. on the global stage as well, right? So in these negotiations with China that are ongoing, Japan, some of these other countries also, what are they thinking when they're at the negotiating table with Scott Bessent, Jamison Greer, and Howard Lutnick when they're looking at the courts? And it's one of the things that Bessent said was that it could be embarrassing as well.
Yeah, and Steve, I want to get you to weigh in on this meeting that's happening today in China. There's Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, and Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, Russia President Vladimir Putin. There's also other world leaders who are not so friendly with the United States, all coming at a time when, say, India is battling with the United States over tariffs and the like. What do you make of this effort for the Chinese, a show of strength of sorts that they're trying to make on the world stage here?
Well, I think it shows us that this is a world of strongmen now. There is no liberal superpower. The United States, nominally an old-fashioned liberal country, but Donald Trump is trying to rule as a superpower. He's turning against American allies. So that's the big picture. The interesting one, as you mentioned, is India, Narendra Modi. 20 years of U.S. policy on nuclear issues and everything else has been designed to make sure that India and China stay antagonistic, that India moves into the US orbit rather than the Chinese orbit. This tariff situation, some of the president's interventions on Kashmir in the recent clashes with Pakistan, that's antagonized Modi, with whom he had a very good relationship. He had 2 massive stadium rallies with him in his first term, and that is a significant geopolitical development.
Yeah, no question about it. And India and China, the fact that they're meeting is so significant we'll see where it ultimately leads to.